Sure.
Should we start recording? Fabulous. Thank you, Antoinette. All right. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. Hope everyone is having a great Friday. Friday so far. It's going to be even better after this talk, right? My name is Dr. Shelley Bhattacharya. I'm in the Department of Family Medicine, and it is truly my honor to introduce Dr. Babu this afternoon. I chair our committee for Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Wanted to acknowledge my vice chair, which is Dr. Hao Zhu. And also we have a fabulous committee that has planned this month under the stewardship of Dr. McGee. So thank you all for being a team and for being here. I wanted to also acknowledge Danielle Binion and Antoinette Redmond, who also work tirelessly behind the scenes to make all this happen. All right, so I wanted to introduce Dr. Rakesh Babu. He will be our keynote presenter this afternoon. He'll be presenting Life Beyond Blindness, the story of an Asian Indian scientist who turned his vision loss into a rewarding career opportunity. A little bit about him. Dr. Rakesh Babu is the lead accessibility scientist at Envision Inc., an organization whose mission is to improve the quality of life for individuals with vision loss through research and practice. Additionally, he has a part-time appointment at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee as the senior scientist in the School of Information Studies. His work focuses on issues concerning diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion as these relate to individuals with vision loss. He specializes in detecting, diagnosing, and remediating environmental factors that lead to this population's social and economic marginalization. His research synthesizes theories in information systems, disability studies, human-centered computing, and the cognitive sciences to inform the development of IT artifacts, organizational policies, and interventions to bring about social and economic inclusion of individuals with vision loss. His research findings are reported in 18 journal articles and 32 conference papers that span multiple disciplines. His work has been sponsored by various international, federal, and regional funding agencies. He came to Envision from academia, where he spent 13 years doing research and university instruction. He has the unique distinction of being the first ever person with blindness to earn a Ph.D. in information systems. This journey began in 2003 when he left Sambalpur, his native town in central India, for Michigan to pursue a master's in information systems. He holds a second master's in organic chemistry and a diploma in labor law and personnel management. Presently, he lives in a single-family home in the northwest part of Wichita, along with his beautiful and ever-youthful mom, Madhuri. Please welcome Dr. Babu.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya. um, and thank you all for giving me this opportunity to meet with you and to tell you my story. And this is the first time I have been requested to, make a presentation about myself. So it was completely new for me, and I had to think about, the progression from despair to, you know, uh, to what is the right word? I'm drawing a blank all of a sudden. To what I am today with accomplishment and here talking to brilliant folks from KUMC like yourselves. This journey, when as I sat down and thought about it, it turned out to be pretty interesting. Things I had not, had time to think about, and so I'm hoping that you would, enjoy listening to this story. And my primary a message that I would like to convey through this presentation is that blindness vision loss is not a tragedy. It is just an inconvenience. It can be, provided we create that environment. Essentially, people who are blind or visually impaired suffer because the environment in the world is so sight-centered by design. And then there are these notions about what what functioning, how to function in this world. So a person who loses the visual perception has difficulty adapting to the sighted world, quote unquote. And then they become problem solvers. That actually becomes, you know, it becomes an opportunity for big troubleshooting, developing innovative ideas and thoughts and coping strategies. So um, that that is what I went through when I grew up with vision impairment. So let me then begin the story by our presentation by talking, a little bit about the agenda for today. So, Danielle, if we could move to the agenda slide. I want to first tell you a little bit about the different identities I represent. As you know, from the title, you have seen I talked about Asian, Indian, blind. These are some of the characteristics or attributes. But what exactly I represent and how that is tied to diversity, inclusion, that is very fascinating. So I would like to talk about that. Then I would like to talk about the story of or the journey of my vision loss. How, after completely losing my sight, I started seeing properly. And then I would like to tell you the story about the opportunities and the accomplishments which came by after I defeated my blindness. And then I would like to finish with concluding remarks, some takeaways, and then we will come to questions. Although I would not mind maybe one question at the end of each slide. That way, um, it is conversational and I can ensure that everybody is awake or there is somebody listening to me. I'm not talking to, you know, um, the disconnected Zoom meeting or whatever. So feel free to, acknowledge or whatever with some verbal, indications.
Will do.
Thank you. All right, so now if we could move on to the identities slide, please.
Okay.
So my first identity is that of an accessibility scientist. Now this, you might ask, what is an accessibility scientist and what does accessibility science mean? Uh, in a very simplistic sense, it involves the study of people who are marginalized from the society and approaches and methods to bring them back into the mainstream and offer them a dignified life. So that is in broadly speaking. And why? What is behind this? Behind this state is this gulf or gap between the individual who has a quote unquote disability and the society at large, which and the economy that comes with it, and all the people who do not have a disability. And the gap is big in terms of what is expected of any individual to function, and what capabilities do individuals have. And in that sense, it applies to not just person with disability, but for people with just different abilities. And so my focus has been on blindness as the disability, um, and integration of people with vision impairment into the society. Um, my primarily I work with uh, organizations, employers, education institutions to assess and deliver accessibility, that so that the people who are blind or visually impaired could be accommodated effectively, or and more importantly, their unique skills and talent be leveraged. So that's one of my identities. My second identity is that I am an Asian Indian, and coming from India. And for those who are not familiar about the geography, India is located almost on the other side of the world from us here. Um, I would say the prime longitudinally and latitudinally talking, um, 82 and half degrees east cuts through India vertically into two halves, and the Tropic of Cancer splits it horizontally into north and south, you can say. And I come from a little known place called Sambalpur in the state of Odisha, which is in the east side, but my hometown is pretty close, I would say, to this intersection between the 82 and a half degrees east um, and the Tropic of Cancer. Now, an interesting thing about India, that that in long back, going back several maybe 1,000, 2,000 years ago, the prime meridian in the world used to be in India, and it would go through India. And the British came on later; they became the center of the world, so they took away the prime meridian to where it is now, that passes through Greenwich. But once upon a time, it used to pass through India, excuse me, and Sri Lanka. So that's what India, where India is. And uh, another piece of identity I bring with me is that I'm multilingual. Just like most of the Indians are, we speak all kinds of languages because every different state has its own languages and its own dialects. So I speak at least three Indian languages, and the Indian English with Indian accent, and then I try to speak English in American accent as well. So that gives me all the diverse perspectives of different cultural norms and linguistic you know thinking as well. Um, the other piece of identity I bring with me is that I am a follower of the Sanatan Dharma, which is more commonly known as Hinduism. And basically, Sanatan Dharma is, it translates into eternal way of life. It is diverse, inclusive, and liberal in by nature, because there are all kinds of gods and goddesses, including we worship animals, plants, and Mother Earth. So and it is not binding on you to have to go to the church or temple on a certain day. You are free to follow whatever lifestyle you follow. Uh, they, so we, as long as you are abiding by the duties. And so I say it inclusive because people of all faith and all religious background are welcome and considered to be a part of this. For example, uh, Christians are called Isai Hindus, Muslims are called Mohammedan Hindus, and Jews are called, the Yahudi Hindus. So it's a very inclusive culture, religion, whatever you want to call. I prefer not to call it a religion because it's a way of life. Um, so that's one piece of identity, and my uh, other piece of identity is that I am blind, and that I have become the first blind person to earn a PhD in information systems. And how did I come to know about this? Um, I have visited all kinds of conferences, academic conferences in the information systems field, and talked to people about coming from different countries, and they have confirmed that they have never met anybody who has a PhD in information systems and who has blindness to come with it. So that makes me a little unique in that sense, I guess. So that's a little bit about my background. And before we move on to the next slide, any question? We can discuss one quick question if anybody has one.
We had a couple of comments. Dr. Bhattacharya said, I didn't know the Meridian line had moved and was once in India. And then Mark Manning said, remarkable accomplishment, Dr. Babu.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, there is some very interesting research that has gone on in India about how how India lost so much of its glory in the middle period, in the 1600 to 1900 hundreds, between that. But uh, so that's good. Then could we move on to the next slide then?
Sure.
Wonderful. So I'm going to talk about this story about my vision loss. And I would say this story begins when I was in my fourth grade, as an 8-year-old kid who starts having difficulty seeing the blackboard from the back benches. And I don't know how many of you here are familiar with the blackboard as the classroom tool, where the teacher would write instruction on using a piece of chalk. And so that's what I had to deal with as a school student. Teachers and the classrooms were not entirely as big as what you have here in the fourth grade classrooms, but relatively bigger, relatively big classrooms to accommodate about 40, 50 students. And what I noticed was that I was not able to read clearly, read the text from written by the teacher from the benches, back benches, and even in the middle benches. So I requested the teacher to assign me a seat up front. And that is the time when my parents also noticed that I was not seeing things at a distance. So my dad took me to the best eye doctor in town for an examination. The doctor did all the, followed all the procedure, testing, for eye tests. And then after all the tests came back, he told dad that there is nothing that could be done to get my sight back. And I saw my dad starting to break down, and tears kept rolling down his cheek. And I said, what the heck? Why am I being, being the reason for my dad's misery? I can't take that. So I snuck into the room where you have the, I don't know what is those called. You might know that better. The display that has all the letters displayed on it, and you're asked to read the different, letters of different sizes. So
Right.
I cheated on that. And when the doctor came back to test my, reading capabilities, I just verbalized that, whatever I had memorized. And he said, oh, this pair of glasses works for him. So it's not as bad as it thinks. So my dad was extremely relieved. And so I felt satisfied that at least, he has some consolation that with some, using glasses and lenses, my son can see. So I kind of felt little relieved there, then and there. And I said, okay, that doesn't matter if I can't see, if I can't read, who cares? So, and this happened a year later. I couldn't have postponed that. My parents, realized that I was not seeing things. So my dad took me to the best eye doctor in India at that time. And he said the same thing. And my dad, again, became so emotional. So I cheated again. And then settled down with that, the pair, the lenses that the second doctor prescribed. In the meantime, my teachers recognized that my glasses were not working. So they let me come up close to the blackboard. So I used to sit, my desk used to be a little further closer to the front of the room. And at one point in time, it became so bad that I couldn't even see, even if I went about a foot close to the blackboard, or if I went, only if I went a foot close. So I then decided, okay, to hell with it. I'm going to sit where it's best, where I can sit with a friend and, enjoy the class rather than be noticed and stand out as the odd man out. And so I went back to the back benches, and I convinced my neighbor, my classmate, that if there was any time they need any help, I could help them if they help me see the blackboard. And so that's the arrangement I worked out with them, and it worked. I didn't feel the odd man out. I became integrated in the class, and that was fine. It went on well. Then I graduated from my high school and came to college. As it started, my eyesight started deteriorating. Um, uh, at that time, a computer class, the first computer class was launched in my native town. So my parents sent me there. My mom in particular said, "Why don't you go and learn computers?" So I went there, and in the first introductory class, the teacher kept talking about the mouse and the screen and this, that, and the other. That didn't make any sense to me because they were all so visually oriented. And I gave up on my computer class, thinking that's not my cup of coffee. It took another several years for me to go back to learning computers. And that actually transformed my life, because this time it was a newspaper article um, that talked about a particular software that can make your computer talk and therefore allow a blind person to use computers non-visually. And it was my sister, my brother-in-law, and my mom who convinced me to spend a fortune to buy a computer and this software, and learn how to use a computer. I'm glad I did that, because that opened the world up for me. I was now able to read um, information, uh, know about people from all over the world, and do research on topics I was interested in. And it was amazing. And I always thought, oh, why didn't they make this thing, this visual an image? If this information could have been conveyed non-visually, that could have made my life so easy. I could have received all that information. So that's the mindset I was in. Um, so uh, when my sister, around 2003, she suggested that I came over to the US for a master's in information systems, and that with my little background in computers and programming, I could pursue a higher education. And not just that, US universities offer accessibility technology and accommodations to people who have vision impairment. And there and there you are judged by your capability, what you can do, and not necessarily what you can't do. I said, whoa, that sounds like where I should be. So I came over to the US for my master's. And before I moved on to the rest of the story, I uh, wanted to talk a little bit about how I coped with that all those years. Um, I would say, even though I didn't see that well, I would use a little bit of guts, a little bit of intuition, and some of my other senses, in particular hearing, to see things. So, uh, a lot of times, for example, if I were, walking or going somewhere, and I noticed somebody walking towards me, um, if I paid attention to their footsteps, or um, you know, in which context I am coming across that person, I would be able to recognize them. So um, at the same time, I used to, and you might find this very interesting, that even until the day I came over to the US, I was still driving a bike in India. And I have driven starting from a bicycle to a scooter, a scooty, and a motorbike. And you can do that, I think, only in India, where you don't have to have a driver's license, especially in those places where you don't have to have certain level of visual capability. Now, so I used to drive, and as I was telling, you know, some of our friends here in the last time I met, I never killed anybody in all those years that I drove. I just stuck to the left side because in India, you know, you have left-hand drive. So I stuck to the left side, and I kept my ears open and never killed anybody. The only time there was any significant accident happened was when I fell into a ditch. It was a big hole that was drilled for some kind of utility repair. But fortunately it was full of water. So I just came out of it as if, you know, I was swimming, and I came out of it unhurt. My scooter got a little scratched up here and there, but I just went about my business. I didn't stop driving after that.
Dr. Babu, may I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
On that? How on earth were you able to navigate?
As I said, first, a little bit of guts. Second, some intuition to be aware of the surroundings, and you know, taking into account what time of the day it was, and listening, paying attention to all the sounds around me. And you know, if somebody would have asked me to drive a car, probably I would not have driven, because it's all closed environment. So there wouldn't be any sound cues.
So how would you be able to hear people walking across the road? Or did they walk? I mean, I'm just in awe that you were able. I'm trying to envision doing something like this, and it's just it is blowing my mind right now.
Barb, this is Geraldine. Just so you know, we requested that he shares this story because he shared it with us during our first meeting. I said, you have got to tell our campus about this, so don't feel bad.
No, and you're absolutely fine. Yes. You have a great question. I had never thought about that myself, because it just came to me naturally. I just avoided people. I don't know how, but as I said, I never killed anybody. I may have hurt somebody very faintly by, you know, scratching them on their arm or something, you know, going past them, but never hit anybody. And, you know, and after I came over to the US, and when I was working on my PhD, at that time I had lost quite a bit of sight. But even then, thanks to my roomie, he was in his undergraduate program then, and bless his heart, he agreed to come with me and take him on a bike ride. Our other roommate had a bicycle, and this guy agreed to be my, you know, passenger. So he sat on the on top of the wheel, I think, and I took him on a ride around the block. Of course, not on the street, but on the sidewalk, because I didn't want to go into jail, you know, to the prison for violating traffic norms. But that was the last time I drove any, you know, vehicle, and it turned out to be fine. Yeah, we navigated the whole block successfully.
There's a comment from Dr. Glenn here. He says that Ray Charles in his autobiography also talked about continuing to ride his bike for a while after he went blind, navigating by memory and sound, quite astounding. And then lots of comments about it being amazing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, Ray Charles, I'm so privileged to be compared to him. Thank you. But the last time actually, I retract my word. The last time I drove something was a golf cart last a couple of years ago in the golf course, of course. And having one of my colleagues on my side, but I always get the thrill out of that, being able to drive. Uh, so that was my second attempt at driving a golf cart. The first attempt wasn't very successful. That was several years ago when I was in Greensboro. And these guys who worked for the research magazine and who had come to interview me for an article about my research, they said, "Hey, Rakesh, would you like to drive? We can take you to a park." And I said, "Oh, sure, let's do that." And I thought it would be an open golf cart. So I was not worried too much about that when they made the proposal. But when they arrived, they came with a closed golf cart, and which was pretty noisy as well. So I lost all sound cues during that. And while I didn't hit anything or ran into a tree or anything, I took a very sharp turn and the van turned into a turtle. So that ended after a few feet, maybe 10, 12 feet. But I have gotten my share of opportunities to do things. So, but yeah, this last time, 2 years ago, I was, at Envision, we do a golf clinic where people with vision loss are paired up with a mentor to in golfing. And I've always had this knack of, seeing things, even a ball and the direction wise, I've been blessed with that sense of direction. So I did pretty well in that golf clinic. I was told that I used to swing pretty well, and then the golf ball would travel 70 yards or something in the right direction. So I don't know how that happened, but that's how that's how it pays when you start to think about seeing with your mind, probably, I guess. And that is why I think blindness or vision impairment becomes inconsequential, if you start using your other senses and a little bit of brain. So, my that has been my vision loss story, mostly doing things that, trying to take that extra chance and see how, if that would succeed, and then go another step. So coming back to my arrival in the US, I, you know, this is very interesting that the day I arrived in the US, I landed in Chicago, I think, and the people I met there, all the staff, airport staff, uh, they were also nice to me. I never felt I came to a foreign land and I looked different. I was, embraced with open arms. So in that sense, I have been very lucky. And to this day, except for maybe a one or two incidents here and there, people have generally accepted me very well, and I appreciate. That is why I have always appreciated my time and my stay in the US and all the wonderful people that I have met here. Um, so I'm always thankful. So when I worked on after I finished my master's, and I went on to go do my PhD, I decided that I'm going to do something meaningful to benefit the society and give back what I have received. So I and work on a topic that is of personal interest and that has value for the society. So I started looking into accessibility as a topic. I started with web accessibility, how the internet could be made more of a level playing field who are blind or visually impaired. And that led from one thing to the other. My dissertation research was on accessibility of online learning environments, in particular learning management systems, and how that can be made more inclusive of a blind person's interaction with the computer, the screen reader software. And I don't know how, if you are able to hear my computer talk once in a while, it blurbs or it announces when somebody leaves or somebody joins the meeting. So let me have this read out to you. Now I let my screen reader read out the title of my presentation. Was that audible?
It wasn't on my end.
It was?
It wasn't.
We could not
It
hear.
wasn't. Okay, so maybe I can let you, have you listen to my phone here. This is my iPhone. And let me turn the volume up if I can. Oops. So my phone, if I tap somewhere on the screen, it read out flashlight. Was that audible?
Very slightly, but that's
Okay.
a really
Yeah,
great
it
tool.
must be very faint. Yeah. But in any case, that's how I use a computer and a smartphone. It talks to me, and that makes things possible. But since there is scope for improvement, and the question is, how do we enable a person who does not see with their eyes, and enable in different contexts? And so as I moved from my PhD to research, to different forms of research, including different contexts like education, social media, and employability and employment and smartphones, I arrived at the stage where I was able to contribute to the betterment of organizations committed to diversity and inclusion by helping them ensure they have an accessible and usable work environment, whether it is, and that includes products and software, hardware, facilities, anything that constitutes the environment for either an employee or a customer. How accessible it is, how well is it designed to accommodate the needs of, or the functional capabilities of a person who is blind or visually impaired. So that's where I my current research is. And Danielle, what slide are we on currently?
We are on the accomplishments slide.
Okay, good. So that's the right slide. I was hoping we went there. I didn't realize we had already gone there, but that's good. So,
Dr. Babu, if I can add, this is Shelley Bhattacharya. It is now 12:47, and I wanted to leave a few minutes for people
yes,
to ask you questions. So,
right. And I'm glad that I have said what I have said, but in 1 minute, let's bring up the last slide.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And these are some things, takeaways, or some things I would like to convey. Where accessibility fits in the diversity and inclusion. So diversity is to invite others to your party, and inclusion is dancing with them. In between, there is this need to have the person read the invitation and come over. That those things that may not be designed properly, and that is what accessibility addresses, that it is all accessible to the person. So that's the little bit about the message that I wanted to convey. And as I said, Envision, my employer, and we are committed to helping other organizations become diverse and inclusive with respect to people who are blind or visually impaired. So that's the story.
Thank you so much, Dr. Babu. I wanted to open up the floor to questions. I see that Barb had a great question. Barb, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Sure. I have a friend whose father he's legally blind as a result of a disease. And he's, as far as like his abilities, he's very, very good, but he gets very frustrated because he has to depend on other people to obviously walk him around. He gets frustrated with this phone that's supposed to talk to him, but it doesn't talk to him properly. And I'm just wondering if there's like a centrally located place for resources that might be able to share maybe some new methods for awareness or tools that could be implemented just to provide a little bit more independent quality of life.
Wonderful question. This is a great need for the society, and Envision has department. It's called the Envision Vision Rehabilitation Center, where people like your friend's dad, who's coping with the loss of sight, are getting frustrated and trying to deal with all the challenges. We have a program and we have occupational therapists, we have orientation and mobility specialists who will offer tricks and training on how to, deal with those situations. The biggest challenge or biggest problem is in our mindset. When it is very difficult to rewire your brain to see without your visual perception. And we tend to cling on to that little bit of sight that we have to the last moment. Once we have given up on our sight, that's when things become very easy. So I can understand the transition that your friend's dad is going through, and depending on which place they are located, they could work with Envision, or so they could recommend, our Vision Rehab Center could recommend other resources that they could.
I wanted to allow our captioner also had a few comments to add.
Sure.
Would you like to unmute?
We can take the next question.
Sure. I have asked the captioner to unmute, so hopefully it'll happen soon.
It was a software glitch, they said.
Got it. I also want to mention there is a service here in Kansas City called Alpha Point.
Yes.
And they're a great resource for helping those with visual impairments, and they do home visits also.
Yes, I can vouch for Alpha Point.
Mm-hmm. I've had
We
many
work with them.
that have been helped
Yeah.
by them. Mm-hmm. Caption, are you able to unmute yourself?
There's no mic on this device they're on, but they said there was a glitch that alerted that
Okay.
there were resources. Okay.
Okay, great. All right. Any other questions?
I had a question, Dr. Babu. You talked about when your sister mentioned coming to the US for a master's degree, that you got really excited about the accessibility and accommodations. Can you share a little bit about the difference you experienced in your educational journey in India versus your time here in the US?
Great question. Thank you for asking. This is something I wanted to highlight, that in India, we do not have a dedicated Office of Disability Services like what we have here in the US, whether or for that matter, any state agency that works with kids, high school kids, on their accessibility needs. I was left all to myself. There are some schools for the blind in India, and which I was not even aware at that time. But all that they do is maybe they would teach you Braille and maybe some white cane skills, very basic. So as I was growing up with my vision loss, I had absolutely no training, no support, institutional support. So uh, uh, I got the impression that in order to pursue a college degree, you would have to work something out yourself. The first time ever I got any assistance was when I sat down for the GRE and the TOEFL. These are two tests that foreign students have to clear before being admitted to a US university. The graduate record exam, GRE, and the TOEFL is the test of English as a foreign language. And in their accessibility section, they had indicated that you could get a scribe and a reader if you are visually impaired. I said, wow, that is awesome. So actually, I came to know about the accommodations in US education right then and there, and because of that, I performed really well. This person was really nice. They read out the questions to me and took my verbal responses, and I was successful in that. So, but when I came over, that's when I saw for real how much else I had at hand. Like we had at that time, I was able to use some of my residual sight to see some pictures or some diagrams. So I was able to use the CCTV. I got different kinds of screen reader, more powerful screen reader assistive technology. And then I went through white cane training. Of course, this white cane training was outside of the university, but the state of Michigan offered me that even though I was a foreign student. So I was very, humbled by that actually, even for today, that I received so much support, not just at the university level, but even from the state. So that then the extra testing time was another important accommodation that helped me as a student. That probably I would have gotten some extra time in India, but most of it was kind of on needs basis. You would have to fight for it. The one thing I forgot to mention is the lack of accommodation, and the one incident that actually turned my impression to more despair. When I I was invited for an interview for a position that was reserved for people with vision impairment. And they said, you'd have to go through a written test. I said, how could you give me a verbal test? Because I can't see, and so I won't be able to write. And they said, if you can't see, what are we going to use you for? This is the word of the recruiting officer. It was, and of course, I can understand that she may be in a bad mood that day. But when she said that, I said, oh, even these reserved positions are also fake. They don't accommodate you for your vision impairment. So to hell with it. I think I got mentally prepared to lead the rest of my life, staying home and doing nothing. So
We have one more quick question.
Mhm.
And that is, what are changes that we can make on an individual level to make our offices more accessible for patients and clients? We have some in the audience that work with students individually for mental health therapy.
I see. So the information, one thing, if you ask me one thing, it would be communicating with the person to ask them, how could we make your visit better? I think that means a lot to the individual. So personally, if when somebody asks me that, I am willing to climb a mountain because I know that there's somebody to extending their arm from the other side. So I think that, and also treating them with a little bit of respect is important. In other words, talk to them as if they are, you are happy to meet them rather than pity on them. That is another thing. So it's mostly these social things, and mostly the attitudinal things that matters more.
Thank you, Dr. Babu. We unfortunately have to end the session because it's right at 1 o'clock, but this was fantastic. Thank you so much. There was a
Well,
comment made that if you had a website, the link to your website, that would be great to pass along. So you can maybe give that to Danielle and then she can pass it on to us. That wowould be fabulous. But thank you again for coming. This was wonderful.
yeah, I love talking to you guys and meeting you and taking your questions. And as I would be happy to share my contact information and and feel free to pass it on to everybody concerned. And I would be happy to follow up with anybody with any follow-up questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I just wanted to share our screen once again, which has all of information of upcoming events. We had our wonderful talk today by Dr. Babu, which is here. This is on the link that Danielle had shared earlier. Dr. Glenn's talk was done last week, and that's also there. Coming up next week, we have on May 18th, a multi-generational perspectives panel, part of our community conversation series. And then that's followed by next Wednesday's Research Day. So we invite you to participate in both of those events next week. And that's followed by our event on May 26th, which is learning about macro and microaggressions here on campus. So please register for all three of these events online or through the link that Danielle posted through the chat. And we look forward to seeing you for all those events. And then as always, we have our link to books that you can have for your kids, that you can read to your kids about this month, Asian Pacific Islander Cultural Awareness Month, and great meals and snack vendors that are around town that support Asian and Pacific Islander themes. Thank you all.
Thank you.